and welcome to Shell Point Today for Monday, June 22nd. I'm Mary Kay Grimaldi.
And I'm Rich Nation. Thanks for watching. On today's show, Terry Koloth will speak with Adrian Kerr about his Academy class tomorrow entitled How Caribbean Sugar Helped George Washington Win Independence. Interesting. And we'll hear from the chair of the Employee Christmas Fund Drive, Cathy Miskell, as she speaks about our caregivers. And finally, Heather Battey and Melanie will provide us with another fit tip to get our bodies moving.
But first, we want to remind you of an opportunity to say goodbye to one of Shell Point's vice presidents. Steve Menier, VP of Healthcare Services, will be retiring later this year, and tomorrow you can join us in thanking Steve for his 11 years of service to Shell Point. So come on out to the Schilling Dining Room at the Larson Pavilion between 2 and 4 p.m. tomorrow and congratulate him on his retirement.
Also tomorrow there will be a library book talk. Floyd Jameson of Parkwood will be reviewing Worthy Fights, a memoir of leadership in war and peace, a contemporary chronicle by Leon Panetta and Jim Newton. A discussion will follow the presentation and refreshments will be served in the social center, and it all starts at 2:15 p.m.
It's time for another Do You Know Your Neighbor, and it's all about Italy. With a name like Grimaldi, that one sounds like it's for me. Be sure to make it out to the Social Center on the island Wednesday at 2:15 p.m. for this event. If you've ever had an interest in or traveled to the beautiful country of Italy, if you've lived there or perhaps speak Italian, then you're sure to enjoy this social gathering. Light refreshments will also be served.
It's important to have essential estate planning documents properly prepared. What should your documents say, especially given the recent tax law changes? What should you do with your documents once they are all signed? Get answers to all your questions about wills, trusts, advance directives, and avoiding guardianship at the Legacy Foundation's Estate Planning Fundamentals for Florida Residents seminar. Did you get that? It will be held Wednesday in the Grand Cypress Room of the Woodlands at 10 a.m., and you can sign up at either service desk.
Adrian Kerr has an interesting class tomorrow where he will explain how Caribbean sugar came into play when George Washington opposed the overwhelming military powers of the British in 1776. Terry Koloth visits with Adrian to give us more insight.
Hi, I'm Terry Koloth. I'm here today with Professor Adrian Kerr. And getting ready to celebrate our country's independence, we're going to look at an aspect of how we were founded. This is a little bit different. It involves sugar. Thanks for joining me, Adrian.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be back at Shell Point again.
Good. And we're going to look at a little bit different aspect about independence, aren't we, with this course?
We are. Yes, indeed. So you have to cast your mind back to the Founding Fathers and the brave step that they made to declare independence. And that was itself fractured and difficult, and it's a hard decision. Many people, weren't keen to separate from England, but the vote was cast and independence was declared. Now what do we do? So the only person resembling a military leader at the time was the Virginian George Washington, and he was appointed commander-in-chief. And it went from bad to worse because he did not have an army. He had a bunch of keen farmers and lawyers and fishermen, and he had to convert them into a fighting force. And the difficulty was that this group of people also had to go back and plant food and do legal cases and brew some beer and look after the family. So they were constantly coming and going. So he never had a fixed army. He had numbers which varied over time, and also their loyalties were split between fighting for the new country but looking after their homeland. And so poor old George Washington had a really tough time because he was fighting against the world's biggest empire, the most organized military machine on the planet, who had the best fighting men and the best navy in the world. So what chance did he have of winning? And of course, he never thought he could beat England. His intention was to be such a pest that, and to do enough damage and to have success in the battlefield and not get caught, because he should not get caught and not let his soldiers get caught. As long as he could keep fighting and keep poking the bear, so to speak, that he thought eventually Britain would lose interest in this war on the other side of the planet, when they were already fighting in other parts of the world against France, and particularly in India. So England had many other activities going on, particularly in the Caribbean. So George Washington's philosophy was, I must not get caught, and my army must stay pretty much intact. That was his philosophy, until he could wear down the bear, until they said, okay, we're done. It didn't quite work out as well as he'd hoped, and the war dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, until he realized that Cornwallis had made a blunder. Cornwallis was an arrogant individual who didn't like taking instructions, and he was the leader of the Southern Army. At that time, all the major cities, apart from Boston, were in British hands and had been for some time. And the English armies were trying in the south to push the independence armies to the point where they wouldn't be a fighting force anymore. So there's this balance going on between a very inexperienced but very active American army and the British army under Cornwallis in the south. Cornwallis could not live off the land, so he had to go to the coast every now and again to be resupplied. And instead of taking orders and heading south to Charleston, which was held by the British, where the Royal Navy could come into Charleston, resupply any army with things they needed, was uniforms, gunpowder, bullets, food, etc., all the paraphernalia that goes with fighting a battle. And this had happened many, many times over. The Royal Navy would come across the Atlantic with supplies, supply them to whichever town on the port was needed, and then go back and get some more. And this has been going on for years. Cornwallis made a blunder. Instead of going to a British port where he knew he'd get secure supplies, he pushed his luck and he went northwards. And this is where George Washington, when he heard the news, said, oh my goodness, now Cornwallis is too far away from any British-controlled port. New York was too far, and Cornwallis decided to go to Yorktown, unheard of little place in the Chesapeake, and wait for the Royal Navy to come and supply him, which was not unreasonable. But for the fact at that very moment, the French Navy in the Caribbean and the French Navy in the Atlantic combined together for the only victory over the Royal Navy in the whole of the War of Independence. And by coming together at that very moment, they were able to form a barricade between the fight in Yorktown and the Royal Navy supplying. And just long enough that Cornwallis ran out of supplies and surrendered.
My goodness.
One of the reasons why he was successful, and George Washington, was because the British had to patrol the Caribbean. This is where most of the money for England came from sugar, more than anything that's coming out of the colonies. Caribbean sugar was the product which gave most amount of income. So the Royal Navy had to have half of its ships in the Caribbean, stopping the French from stealing their sugar. And so sugar and the control of sugar became more important almost than winning the war. And because Britain split its navy, the French were able to hold off the Royal Navy, and thereby Cornwallis ran out of supplies, and that ended the Yorktown incident. This was not the end of the war. Cornwallis expected the war to continue eventually because other armies had lost and been replaced. And so nobody at that time realized this effectively was the end of the war. They thought that we're going to be resupplied, new soldiers would be brought in, because after all, the British still controlled Philadelphia, the capital, and Charleston and other ports, Philadelphia, I mentioned, and New York. So they controlled the eastern seaboard, and the colonials, they controlled the land inside and Boston. And even up in the northern states the British were in control. So nobody at that time, when Cornwallis surrendered, would have said, okay, that's the end of the war, great, good news. They thought, okay, what's going to happen next? But the George Washington's prediction was correct. The Founding Fathers were absolutely right. At this point, having lost another army and needing more taxation in England, finally, the people of England said enough, and Parliament voted to find a truce and a peace settlement. So sugar accidentally became that extra help that George Washington needed to win the war.
As an historian, it must be, it must feel really good to have so much documentation to look at when you're looking at something and putting it into a perspective today.
It is, and there's a lot of, as you know, the Founding Fathers wrote extensively, and all those documents have pretty much survived. And the one that I like the most, which is in the Library of Congress, is a letter that George Washington wrote to the French Admiral de Grasse after the Yorktown victory. And he said, from now onwards, people will realize that this battle was mostly won with the help of the French Navy, not the land forces. So he thanked de Grasse for his contribution to the victory.
Interesting. Well, as always, we look forward to learning more, and especially learning more closer to home for us.
Yes, indeed.
Please join us to find out about how Caribbean sugar, more about how Caribbean sugar helped George Washington win independence.
And now it's time to hear from this year's chair of the Employee Christmas Fund Drive. Cathy Miskell wants to bring to your attention the hard work and dedication of Shell Point's caregivers in this month's Attitude of Yes segment.
I have occasion to be at the Larson Pavilion pretty much every day. One of the most impressive things I see there, and I see it at the Arbor and at King's Crown too, happens when a resident wants to speak to a doctor, a nurse, one of the therapists, or the nursing aides. Invariably, the caregiver stops what they're doing, turns to face the resident, leans toward them if they happen to be seated, and gives them their full attention. They do not shuffle paperwork. They do not interrupt if the resident needs an extra moment or two to frame a thought or question. They are wholly present to that person. Everything about the way they treat the resident says to them, you are valuable. You are interesting, and yes, I am here for you. A donation to the Employee Christmas Fund is a way that we can say to these marvelous and gifted caregivers, I see you too, I appreciate you, and yes, I am here for you. It's easy to give to the Employee Christmas Fund. This year, in addition to the regular mailing with the return envelope and the donation boxes, which will be distributed throughout the campus, we are introducing an exciting new innovation. This year, the Employee Christmas Fund will have its own web page at shellpoint.net. It's full of useful and interesting information, and best of all, it has an online donation form. You can just take a couple of minutes, fill in your name, a few other facts, and indicate whether you want to make a one-time donation or use the monthly giving option. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple. I encourage you to give. I'm Cathy Miskell, and I am privileged to be this year's Employee Christmas Fund Chairman.
It's time once again to get up and get moving for health's sake. Fitness trainer Melanie Broad and Heather Battey of Resort Services have another fit tip to show you that will get your blood pumping.
Hi, I'm Heather Battey, and I'm Melanie Broad. We're here today with our fit tip. All right, we're gonna work abs today, so I'm gonna have Heather lie down because she's such a good demonstrator. And today we're gonna do a little bit of Pilates. This is a crunchless abdominal exercise. Crunching is usually when you lift your head and your shoulders. We're not gonna do that. Yeah, that's a crunching exercise. Great for your rectus abdominis. But we're gonna have Heather lie flat. She's gonna pull one knee into her chest, and she's gonna elevate the long leg. Right here, this is, yes, your rectus abdominis, but also your lower body. So I'm gonna have her switch legs. Switch legs, good. Never letting the leg touch the ground. It's giving you leg strength. So how can you make this more difficult? You lift your head, that's it. you have neck troubles, maybe you only lift your head every other one or every fourth one, but this is a great way to tone your whole abdominal from the top all the way down. Good job, Heather.
Thanks, I have a good instructor.
That's it for today's Fit Tip. See you next time.
And now, let's bring you up to date on all the latest happenings, Academy news, menus, and Village Church connections, right after this Listening to the Words preview from David Howenstein.
You've tuned to a good Listening to the Words program if you're a father, a sibling, or a wife. Well, you'll hear Shell Point TV staff member Adam Brown read a story about a father's reminder that angry words leave scars. You'll hear a remembrance of a father who was cheap and proud of it. A son whose father made him feel like an equal. Actress Joan Marshall's reading of a woman who made forgiveness of her father indelible. A daughter wishing she could again enjoy a cup of coffee with her 95-year-old father. And you'll hear a son recall the fun of being rousted from bed by a father he fondly called the Grumpus. I'm your reader host, David Howenstein, reminding you that this 30-minute Father's Day program is 7 days long, playing on Shell Point Channel 12 twice each hour. It's always there when you need it, whether at 12 noon or 12 midnight. Those who cannot get Shell Point Channel 12 can go to www.shellpoint.net and click on Media, and then click on Listening to the Words. Or you or your relatives can listen to any of the programs at www.shellpoint.net/listening.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Happening segment of Shell Point TV. My name is Bev Chandley and I'm here to tell you the activities that we offer for you here today at Shell Point. We're going to start the activities off this morning with virtual bowling at the Resident Activity Center. That's at 8:45. 9 o'clock we have the men's round robin doubles tennis at the Woodlands Tennis Courts. Billiards will be played at the Resident Activity Center at 9:15. We have Lollygaggers Paddlers meeting at the kayak storage area for their paddle at 9:15. And one more 9:15 activity today is pottery with instruction available at the Pottery Studio. At 10 o'clock, the Suzy Q boat heads to Matanzas on the bay. You do need to sign up for the Suzy Q trips. And the Disciple Men's Study Group will be in the game room of the Woodlands at 10:30. 10:45 is the time for table tennis with a clinic at the Tarpon Room down in the tunnel. And then at 11:30 we have a Health Connections class, Agility and Flexibility. That's in the Health Club on the island. It's currently full. Now we're going to move into the afternoon lineup. At 12 o'clock we have Mahjong. That's in the Sable Room of the Woodlands. 1:15 we have Advanced Table Tennis in the Tarpon Room. Also at 1:15 we have a Health Connections class. It's All About You. That's in the Osprey Room on the island. We have a Health Connections class, Complexion Perfection. That's in the Social Center. It's currently full and that's at 1:15. And our last 1:15 activity is Samba. That's a card game and that's at the Resident Activity Center. We're going to move to 2 o'clock where the Beady-Eyed Bead Club will be in the Oak Room of the Woodlands. 3 o'clock we have a Health Connections class, Pilates Stretch. That's in the Health Club on the island. The singles table at the Crystal will be available at 5 o'clock. And at 6:30, we round out the evening with Duplicate Bridge. That's in the game room of the Woodlands. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I will be back here Tuesday to do the happenings once again.
Hi, I'm Terry Coleth with your Academy information for Monday, June 22nd. At 10:30, we have an Anatomy of Words class meeting in the Oak Room of the Woodlands, and every single week they welcome new people. I'd like to tell you about some classes coming tomorrow that are new. How Caribbean Sugar Helped George Washington Win Independence, a history lecture with Professor Adrian Kerr. And then we have that iPad or iPhone walk-in clinic with Penny Modridge of Nautilus and some other very generous volunteers.
Menus for Monday. In the Crystal Room, the Crystal Platter is stuffed cabbage served with oven brown potatoes and asparagus. The dinner special is Old Home Cooking Night for $11.95, and the soup of the day is chicken gumbo. In the Island Cafe for lunch, the special is a mushroom Swiss burger with fries for $7.75. The dinner special is smoked sausage with pasta, tomato, and spinach for $8.75. And the Palm Grill is closed on Mondays. All menus are available 24 hours a day at www.shellpoint.net.
Welcome to Village Church Connections. I'm David Pavey. Lord, who may dwell in your sanctuary? Asked the psalmist David. Who may live on your holy hill? Sanctuary, holy hill. Today we no longer think in terms of living in the Jewish house of worship or on Mount Zion, but we still want to live close to God. At least I hope we do. I do. So how do we do that? Good question. Living close to God requires that we obey Him. Ironically, however, it's in obeying God that we experience true freedom. With the reopening of the Statue of Liberty some time ago, freedom resurfaced as a popular theme in America, though it was and is often misunderstood. The huddled masses longing to be free soon found out that freedom is not license. Their freedom required them to live in obedience to the laws of their adopted country. It's amazing to read in Scripture that even Christ pleased not himself. Now think about that. Even Christ pleased not himself. Jesus himself said, I do always those things that please my Father. Always. So God calls believers to obedience to him in the spirit of this psalm. He wants us to have a life marked by righteousness, integrity, kindness. This is real freedom. Freedom from our propensity to evil. Freedom from selfish living. Freedom not to do our own thing. Freedom to please God is our highest priority. One day a boy told his father, Dad, I want to be free. Son, came the reply, son, when you do what you're told, you'll be really free. The Christian who wants to live close to God as King David did is free not to mock the religion of Muslims and others. The Christian who wants to live close to God is free not to shoot or loot as a means of protesting injustice, real or perceived. If we want to live close to God, we need to follow the example of Jesus and do always those things that please God, our Heavenly Father. So, how are you doing? Are you living close to God today? And thank you for tuning in to Village Church Connections.
Thanks for joining us for Shell Point Today on Monday, June 22nd. Be sure to return tomorrow when we will discuss the estate planning seminar presented by the Academy of Lifelong Learning. We'll meet Shell Point residents Dick and Beulah Johnston of Turbin, who have fascinating histories as missionaries. Until then, I'm Mary Kay Grimaldi.
And I'm Rich Nation. On behalf of all the people here at Shell Point TV, we'd like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again here tomorrow.